Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They thought I wouldn't notice. 24 steel garages built overnight on land that's been in my family for generations. No warning, no permission, just bold assumptions and suburban arrogance. But here's the thing about crossing a quiet man with a bulldozer. You better bring a lawyer, not a clipboard. There's something about land that calms your bones until someone messes with it. My name's Michael Rhodes. I'm 46 and I own 300 acres of private land just outside a mid-sized town in Oregon. I'm not a recluse, though I like my space. I'm not paranoid, but I know where every tree, fence post, and inch of property line lies. This land has been in my family since the Carter administration, passed from my grandfather to my father, and now to me. It's not just property, it's legacy. And where I come from, you don't disrespect legacy, especially not with a clipboard and a community vision. The property itself is a patchwork of peace. The northern third is dense woodland, wild and beautifully unkempt. I leave it alone mostly. That part of the land belongs to the deer and the wind. The middle stretch is operational. A few workshops, storage sheds, and a wide gravel road that cuts clean through the property like a scar of purpose. The southern section, well, that's the future. I've been preparing it for something bigger. Guest houses, maybe. Cabins for veterans. A retreat center. Haven't nailed it down yet. But it's fenced, surveyed, zoned. And most importantly, mine. Bordering my eastern edge is a neighborhood that looks like it was built by a Home Depot catalog. Pastel houses with vinyl siding. SUVs that never leave the driveway. And perfectly round shrubs trimmed like topiary marshmallows. They call it Crescent Ridge Estates, managed by an HOA, with the kind of energy you'd expect from people who think barking dogs are an act of terrorism. I had no beef with them, really. I kept to myself. They kept to theirs. We had that invisible wall between us, the kind you don't see on a map, but you feel it in your gut. I'm not part of their HOA. Never was. Never signed a document, never paid a fee, never asked to be included in their bake sales, Christmas light wars, or petty newsletter drama. And they knew it. At least I thought they did. It started subtly, a couple of trucks parking suspiciously close to the eastern tree line, then a fresh gravel path I didn't authorize showing up just past the ridge, a few surveyor flags flapping in the wind where no surveyor should have been. I chalked it up to someone losing their compass. Mistakes happen. Maybe the city was checking utilities. I let it go. Once. But then came the real gut punch. I took my ATV out for a ride one Sunday morning, like I do every few weeks. The ride helps me clear my head, walk the land, stay connected to the soil beneath my boots. I rode toward the eastern corner, the part I rarely visit unless I'm checking boundaries or mapping new projects, and that's when I saw it. Steel. Rows of it. I braked so hard the back tires kicked up gravel and pine needles. I just sat there, engine idling, helmet still on, staring through the early mist like I'd just stumbled onto a spaceship landing. 24 brand new metal garages, glossy, numbered, symmetrical like teeth in a jaw. There were security lights on poles, motion sensors, even a laminated sign that read, Community Garage Block, Crescent Ridge HOA. I laughed. Out loud. One dry, stunned chuckle that echoed out into the trees. Then came the silence, the kind that pulls all the blood out of your head, because I knew this wasn't a mistake. You don't accidentally build 24 garages. You don't accidentally wire floodlights and label parking spots. You don't accidentally stomp onto another man's land and claim it for your little suburban kingdom. You only do that if you think he won't notice. Or worse, that he won't fight back. That's when I knew this wasn't just a zoning error or a clerical flub. This was war. And I don't lose wars. I sat there on my ATV for a solid minute, engine idling, staring at the alien skyline of metal rooftops that had invaded my land. 24 steel garages, brand new, evenly spaced, numbers stenciled on the front like military barracks. There were utility poles, fresh wiring, even floodlights with motion sensors. I thought I was hallucinating. Maybe I had taken a wrong turn, crossed into someone else's lot. I pulled out my GPS and double-checked the parcel coordinates. Nope, this was my land. Squarely, legally, undeniably mine. I rolled closer, my tires crunching over the fresh gravel. That's when I spotted the sign, small, white, with the smug little logo of the local HOA stamped in blue ink. Underneath, Community Storage Expansion Phase 2. HOA members only. Unauthorized access prohibited. Phase 2. Prohibited? On my land. I parked and dismounted slowly, like approaching a crime scene. I circled the perimeter in disbelief. These weren't hastily dumped sheds. These were installed, anchored, leveled, connected to power. One had an air freshener swinging from the door handle. Another had a sticker that said Harley inside. These weren't just garages, they were already in use. And that's when the anger began to bubble. Not the quick flare-up kind. No, this was slow, heavy, personal. This land wasn't just property, it was bloodline, history. You don't just stroll in and build on someone's family ground like it's a parking lot behind a strip mall. I stormed home, still half hoping this was some clerical error, a mix-up in lot lines. I called the county records office. They pulled up the GIS map and confirmed it. That corner of land, still mine. No rezoning, no easements, still legally in my name. I hung up, then did something I hadn't done in months. I walked next door, not into HOA territory, but to the last house before the tree line. The neighbor, Jim, had lived there 5 years. We mostly waved across fence lines, but I figured he'd know something. I knocked. Jim opened, mid-sip of a beer, and smiled like he was expecting me. "Oh, hey, Mike, you hear about the garages?" My heart skipped. What about them? Well, HOA said they were putting in storage units for the community. You know, for overflow, boats, motorcycles, whatever. They said the land was just unused city property. Figured it'd be better than letting it grow wild. I stared at him. "Jim, that land is mine." His face dropped. "You serious?" As a heart attack. He muttered a stunned "damn," then looked back toward the woods. "Well, they've been renting them out for weeks. Even had a sign-up sheet at the HOA meeting. I got one for my brother's fishing boat." Now I was getting the full picture. The HOA had taken it upon themselves to expand their community amenities by colonizing the nearest open land they could find. Mine. No request, no communication, just sheer audacity wrapped in suburban entitlement. They must have assumed I was asleep at the wheel, or too far away to notice. Maybe they thought I wouldn't care. Or worse, they thought I'd fold. They'd misjudged the hell out of me. I thanked Jim, returned home, and spent the next few hours reviewing every document I had on the land. Property line surveys, tax records, ownership history. I printed duplicates. I highlighted sections. I even laminated one just for the drama of it. And then I opened my email, found the number for my old construction foreman, and sent a simple message. "I need the crew tomorrow. Bring equipment. We're doing a teardown." No permits, no warnings, no apologies. Because if the HOA thought they could build without permission, they were about to learn what unauthorized demolition looked like. The sun hadn't even burned off the morning mist when Richie's old diesel flatbed came rumbling down my drive. Trailer hitched with 2 yellow bulldozers and a backhoe stacked like angry beasts ready to pounce. Right behind him came the crew, 6 men I'd worked with on dozens of builds. Hard hats, thermoses, steel-toed boots. No questions asked, no paperwork, just the way I needed it. I greeted them with a calm nod and handed out photocopies of my property lines like menus at a steakhouse. "This entire area," I pointed on the map, "is mine. They built without permission. No permits, no contracts, no communication. Today, we return it to nature." The guys looked at each other and smiled. Richie, chewing the same damn toothpick he's had since 2004, asked, "So, how aggressive are we talking?" Let's just say I want it to look like those garages were never born. We rolled out by 7:30 a.m. I'd already cut the padlock off the temporary HOA gate they installed on my own damn service road and replaced it with my own. First step, shut down the power. They'd tapped into an existing pole that belonged to a utility line running along the back of my property. Sloppy. I flipped the breaker on the main service panel, snipped the connections, and zip-tied a warning sign. Private utility disconnect, HOA not welcome. Then came the fun part. The first garage groaned like a wounded animal when the bucket hit it. One clean shove, and the walls crumpled inward like a beer can. I swear I heard birds scatter halfway to the county line. Sheet metal tore, siding buckled, fluorescent lights shattered on impact. It was beautiful. The team worked in rhythm. One dozer pushing, the backhoe stacking the panels, another crew loading the twisted remains onto flatbeds. Each unit took about 15 minutes to flatten and clear. In under 5 hours, 15 were gone. By lunch, we were standing where 24 garages had stood just the day before, now reduced to a pile of sad corrugated leftovers. One of the guys spray painted the side of the last dump trailer for fun. Thanks for the scrap. HOA, poetry. And, oh, before we wrapped, I took their shiny, smug little HOA plaque that had been bolted onto a concrete pillar out front, set it upright, and wrote on it with red spray paint. You build on my land, I build your regret. Was it dramatic? Maybe. But if they wanted suburban theater, I was giving them front row seats. We regraded the soil, smoothed the gravel back to its original shape, and reseeded the edges for good measure. By dusk, the place looked like it hadn't been touched in years, just forest edge and clean dirt. No sign of the unauthorized HOA expansion project. Just peace and righteous silence. No press, no lawyers, no polite back and forth. I didn't send an email. I didn't lodge a complaint. I sent a message, and it was loud enough that I figured even the HOA president could hear it from her quartz countertopped kitchen. Sure enough, the next morning, I found out she had heard it very clearly, and she was bringing company. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when I heard it, the distinct screech of tires attempting intimidation. A black SUV rounded the bend of my driveway like it was chasing a getaway van. I didn't need a name tag to recognize the woman marching toward my porch in wedge heels and fury. Karen Mills, HOA president, queen of condescension, self-proclaimed protector of lawn conformity and mailbox etiquette. And today, apparently, she had chosen violence, at least verbally. She wasn't alone. Trailing behind her like mismatched ducklings were two men in blazers, probably board members or, judging by the clipboards and the way they tripped over gravel, confused real estate agents. Flanking the group was a man in a rumpled suit, dragging a briefcase and sweating like he was about to defend the Titanic. That had to be the lawyer. Karen didn't knock. She shouted, "Michael Rhodes, you come out here right now." I took one last sip of coffee, made sure my porch camera was recording, and opened the screen door with my best expression of calm amusement. "Morning," I said. "Coffee? Don't play coy with me," she snapped, eyes blazing. "You destroyed HOA property. You've committed vandalism, destruction of community assets, and possibly theft of materials." One of the clipboard gents nodded nervously like he was being graded. I leaned on the porch rail. "Karen, those community assets were illegally built on my land. I've got the deeds, the maps, the GPS data, and the footage to prove it. Would you like a printed copy, or should I just tattoo it on your lawyer?" She turned to her attorney, whose soul visibly tried to leave his body. "We had unanimous board approval," she hissed, "for building on land that wasn't yours." I raised an eyebrow. "Fascinating. I'd love to see that approval form, especially the part where my name appears as the landowner." Karen whipped out a manila folder and dramatically yanked out what I can only describe as a bogus property plan with a highlighter massacre and a signature that looked suspiciously like hers. "My team confirmed this was public use overflow land," she said proudly. I smirked. "Your team?" "Karen, your team thought my game trail cameras were deer feeders." Her jaw clenched. I could tell she wasn't used to pushback, certainly not from someone who didn't have an HOA fee due on the first of the month. That's when I pulled the ace from my back pocket, a thumb drive. I walked down the porch steps and handed it to her attorney directly. "That's your client," I said on video, ordering crews to get the garages up before the guy notices. You'll also see the part where she overrides a foreman who says they don't have land clearance. Karen's face went pale. The lawyer blinked, took the drive, and said in the softest tone I'd heard all day, "I think we're going to need a moment." But Karen wasn't done yet. No, she had one more glorious card to play. "We'll be pressing charges," she declared. "You won't get away with this. The HOA is filing a lawsuit for damages, and we are reporting you to the county for unauthorized demolition." I paused, then I laughed. Not the polite kind, the full-bodied, hand-on-stomach, "Oh, sweet Lord" kind of laugh that echoes off tree trunks and makes squirrels run for cover. "You're suing me for removing structures you built on my land without permission." "Oh, Karen," I wiped a tear from my eye. "I can't wait for this court date. I'm going to bring snacks." She stormed off with the kind of stomp that screams, "I have never lost an argument, and I will not start today." But the truth was already heavy in the air, and everyone, the lawyer, the clipboard twins, even the squirrels, knew it. This wasn't over. This was going to court, and it was going to be beautiful. You ever walk into a courtroom knowing you've already won? It's a strange kind of calm, like watching a fire when you're the one holding the extinguisher. My attorney, Paul Whitaker, was a sharp-tongued former prosecutor with a face like a marble bust and a voice that could turn confession into performance art. He wore three-piece suits and had a hobby of grilling witnesses for sport. We were early. Always be early when you're about to publicly dismantle a bureaucracy. HOA showed up 15 minutes late. Of course, Karen arrived first, dragging a rolling briefcase that looked more ornamental than functional, followed by a trio of tired-looking lawyers and two board members I recognized from the porch showdown. They avoided eye contact. One even tripped over the pew seating. A promising start. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Crawford, entered with the gait of someone already fed up with suburban drama before the first syllable had been spoken. When the bailiff called the case, I felt Paul shift into predator mode beside me. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth as bourbon, "my client, Mr. Rhodes, is the legal and undisputed owner of the parcel in question. The Homeowners Association, of which Mr. Rhodes is not a member, trespassed onto his land, constructed 24 unauthorized structures, collected rental income from said illegal use, and, upon being discovered, attempted to accuse him of vandalism for removing their property from his land." Judge Crawford gave a long blink, the kind that says, "This better not waste my morning." Karen's lawyer, a stiff man with a comb-over and a folder full of ambition, stood and began reading from a prepared statement about community needs and collective benefit. 5 minutes in, Judge Crawford held up a hand. "Do you have documentation granting you legal access or permission from the landowner?" There was a pause. He shuffled papers. Karen leaned in, whispering urgently. "Ma'am," the lawyer offered weakly. "We acted under the impression that the land was unclaimed common area." Paul stood so fast his chair nearly flipped. "Your Honor, not only is that claim false, but we have video evidence showing the HOA president instructing contractors to build without checking property lines, including statements such as, 'He won't notice,' and 'We'll deal with it later.'" He handed over a USB drive. The judge plugged it in. The courtroom watched Karen's face on the screen, barking orders, swiping aside concerns from a hard hat-wearing contractor who explicitly warned her there was no legal approval. The courtroom was silent. Karen's face in real life, a cocktail of crimson and dread. The final blow came when Paul presented an expense report from the HOA's own records, showing not only the cost of construction, but income from garage rental fees already collected, over $30,000. Direct profit from squatting on private land. Judge Crawford leaned forward. "Mrs. Mills, did you personally authorize this?" Karen tried to pivot. "It was a collective board decision. Were you the one who signed the work order?" Silence. Then a reluctant, "Yes." "Thank you," the judge said, like she'd just closed a tab at a bad bar. "I've heard enough." She ruled swiftly. The HOA was ordered to pay $345,000 in damages for trespass, unauthorized construction, profit gained from unlawful use, and the cost of restoration. Karen Mills was referred to the district attorney for further investigation regarding forgery and misrepresentation, and the court imposed a civil penalty for abuse of authority. HOA operations were to be placed under court-supervised oversight for the next 12 months. Karen sat frozen, staring straight ahead, like she'd seen her reflection in a funhouse mirror. One of her board members muttered, "I told you this would happen," under his breath, loud enough for the bailiff to chuckle. I stood, thanked the judge, and shook Paul's hand with quiet satisfaction. And as I walked out of the courtroom, sunlight pouring through the double doors, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. We'd won. Not just the land, not just the case. We'd reclaim the one thing HOA presidents hate more than weeds and sidewalk cracks: limits. The thing about justice is, it doesn't always come with fireworks or theme music. Sometimes it arrives in a slow, grinding tumble, like watching a train finally run out of track. And, for Karen Mills, that moment came not with a bang, but with the unceremonious ding of her HOA email being deactivated and her presidency stripped the very next morning. Within a week of the court ruling, she'd stepped down, or rather been strongly encouraged to resign by what remained of the HOA board. She went from issuing citations about mailbox colors to being the cautionary tale whispered about over hedge clippers and garden hoses. Rumor had it she tried to rally sympathy by framing herself as a victim of overreach. But that ship didn't just sink, it exploded. When word got out that she'd forged documents, lied to board members, and funneled community dues into her garage empire fantasy, her reputation went up in smoke like a Christmas tree in July. At first, she stayed in the neighborhood, trying to act like nothing happened, but the whispering started. Side eyes followed her walks. One neighbor told me she showed up to a HOA meeting, uninvited, and someone had already moved her seat to the far back corner, behind the water cooler. 3 months later, a "for sale" sign appeared in front of her house. One of the board members told me in hushed tones she left in the middle of the night. I like to imagine her last act in the neighborhood was wrestling a roll of bubble wrap into the back of her SUV, muttering about ungrateful peasants. As for the HOA, they didn't come out unscathed. The court-ordered oversight team, basically a group of county-appointed watchdogs and business casual, came in like a SWAT team of common sense. Budgets were reviewed, rules rewritten, power structures dismantled. Every petty infraction ever issued under Karen's reign got a second look, and in more than one case, reimbursement. You've never seen grown men cry like HOA members who just found out their fence violation fines were invalid. What's funny is how quickly people change their tune. Neighbors who once defended the HOA's vision suddenly remembered how overbearing it had been. One guy, Frank, a retiree with a fondness for vintage trucks, came by with a six-pack and said, "You know, Mike, I didn't think you had it in you, but I'm glad you did. Damn glad." Even Jim, the neighbor with the fishing boat who unknowingly rented one of the illegal garages, brought over a smoked brisket and offered to help replant trees on the flattened lot. Me, I kept it simple. After the court win, I didn't build a billboard or parade the judgment papers around town. I just got back to work. The cleaned-up land was quiet again, peaceful, a blank slate, ready for the guest houses I'd originally planned. Only now, the land felt earned. Every time I drove my ATV past that clearing, I couldn't help but grin. Not because I'd destroyed something, but because I'd rebuilt something better. Boundaries, respect. A very clear message that said, "This land is mine." And next time you forget that, bring a lawyer, not a clipboard. Summer rolled in like it always did in Oregon, slow, golden, and smelling faintly of pine and diesel. With the court case behind me, the HOA declawed, and Karen reduced to a Zillow alert in someone else's zip code, I figured it was time to close the chapter the way any self-respecting landowner should. With a barbecue, but not just any barbecue, this one was going to be a celebration, a send-off, a neighborhood event for those who still believed in fences, property lines, and not screwing over the guy with 300 acres and a bulldozer. I sent out handwritten invites. Come eat where 24 illegal garages once died. On the back, B.A. Oaks, bring your own common sense. I fired up the smoker the night before, had 2 briskets going by dawn, and laid out enough side dishes to qualify as a Midwestern buffet. Chairs circled the once occupied patch of land. The gravel had been replaced with grass, and the sun broke perfectly through the tree line, like even the weather wanted in on the joke. And at the center of it all stood one last garage, the sole survivor. It wasn't intact exactly. The sides had been reinforced, the roof repainted gold, and I had the words stenciled across the front in big black letters. The HOA Memorial Garage, dedicated to bad decisions and bold assumptions. Inside, I'd staged a mini exhibit, laminated printouts of the fake permits, a cardboard cutout of Karen pointing at a blueprint, and a folding chair labeled Timeout Corner for Presidents Only. People came. Some I hadn't spoken to in years. They laughed. They ate. They took selfies next to the golden garage like it was a roadside attraction on Route 66. Kids played frisbee. Someone brought a homemade sheet cake with the words, "You had no permit for that slice." Even old Frank showed up with his wife and a 6-layer dip that vanished in minutes. At one point, someone passed around a Sharpie, and folks began writing their own HOA horror stories on the back wall of the garage. By sundown, it looked like a confession booth from suburban purgatory. Before everyone left, I stood up on the tailgate of my truck, raised a beer, and gave the shortest speech I could muster. Thanks for coming. Thanks for remembering what boundaries are, and if anyone ever tries building on my land again. I pointed to the golden garage. This is your future. Laughter, applause, a few genuine thank yous. And just like that, the chapter closed. I still drive past that spot every morning. The garage stands like a crooked trophy, not of destruction, but of resolve, of what happens when someone tries to take what isn't theirs and learns the hard way that not all fences are made of wood. Some are made of will. And mine is reinforced steel.